The prince only had 7 days to live. Woman, start confessing your sins, else you will be struck by the gods of thunder. It is not my fault. Mama caused it all. On arriving home, Adaku informed her 2 daughters that they would now be living in the palace. She called them aside and whispered her plans in their ears, and they were very excited. Some months after Queen Kelechi brought her father, stepmother and stepsisters to live in the palace, she became pregnant. The news excited her husband, the king, who immediately called on the midwives to check the gender of the unborn child. According to history, the royal family has always been known to give birth to a male child first, who would later become the current king's successor. Anything outside that will be considered abnormal and a taboo. The midwives confirmed that the gender of the child the queen was carrying is male. The king felt happy and fulfilled, saying, "Very soon, I will give this kingdom an heir apparent to the throne, just like my forefathers have done. The gods are certainly behind me." He immediately informed all the maids in the palace to treat the pregnant queen with care and attention, as he did not want to see her stressed. Queen Kelechi happily informed her family about her pregnancy. They all pretended to be happy for her, but deep down, her stepmother and stepsisters were very bitter against her. Adaku was deep in thought in her chambers. She once again reached for her evil calabash and chanted, "Kelechi, I have allowed you to taste happiness enough. Now is my turn. I hereby turn that male child in your womb into a female child." Immediately, Kelechi in her chambers felt a discomfort in her stomach, but it quickly disappeared. Over 9 months later, it was time for Queen Kelechi to give birth. The midwives attended to her as she pushed during labor. The king also anxiously waited at the midwife's entrance door. Some hours later, one of the midwives came out holding the just delivered baby with a gloomy look. She handed the baby over to the king and whispered, "It is a girl." The king quickly grabbed the baby, looked at its genitals, and discovered that indeed it was a baby girl. With confusion, disappointment, and anger, he quickly tossed the child back to the midwife and walked out. The atmosphere in the whole palace was as though someone has just passed on instead of celebration. It was a taboo for the royal family to birth a female child as the first child. Because of this, the king became very resentful of Queen Kelechi and thought she was cursed. One day, Queen Kelechi was in her chambers holding a newborn female child and crying. She said, "My mother in heaven, why would you let me suffer like this? Am I truly cursed? Because of this child, my loving husband has now turned his back on me. Why do I have to suffer so much in this world?" But within her, she promised to love and take good care of her daughter no matter what. Unknowingly, Adaku was by her chamber door, eavesdropping. She had a huge smile on her face and thought to herself, "My plans are working." Adaku, knowing how angry and vulnerable the king was, secretly went to meet him in his chambers to finish her evil plans. She knelt down, greeted the king, and empathized with him. After that, she said, "Your Highness, please do not be annoyed with what I am about to tell you. Your wife Kelechi is an evil child known as Ogbanje, and that is why she killed her mother while giving birth to her. And because of this, she has sworn an oath with her members to ruin your reign by not giving you a male child. It is better you marry one of my daughters who will give you a male child." The king became alert and was deep in thought. After much consideration, the king agreed to marry Adaku's eldest daughter, Uloma, because he was desperate for an heir that would succeed him. He already felt hatred for Kelechi and wanted nothing to do with her. Soon, Kelechi and her daughter were tagged Ogbanje and evil in the palace. This made them live almost like maids in the palace. Uloma became pregnant shortly after the wedding, and it was confirmed that she would give birth to a male child. This made her the king's favorite, and he instructed all the palace maids to be at her beck and call. As the queen's mother, Adaku started living like a queen herself. She wore the finest outfits and jewelries befitting of a queen. She had accomplished her goals. Kelechi continued to suffer and lived like a servant with her daughter in the palace. A few months later, Uloma gave birth to a beautiful male child, which excited the whole kingdom, and the king's joy knew no bounds. 7 years later, the prince became seriously ill. The king consulted all the best medicine men and native doctors in the kingdom to heal the prince, but none of them could cure the prince of the strange ailment. According to all of them, the prince only had 7 days to live. One of the king's chiefs quickly remembered and mentioned Agaba, the greatest native doctor from a faraway land. The king called on the strongest of his guards to travel and bring Agaba. The journey would take them 6 days. There was tension and fear in the whole kingdom, as the only heir to the throne was about to die if they could not find and bring Agaba to the palace in 6 days. It had been 6 long days that the palace guards traveled in search of the greatest native doctor, Agaba. The king, Uloma, Adaku, and many others had been worried sick and waiting in anticipation as the prince's situation had worsened. By the evening of the 6th day, the palace guards and Agaba arrived at the palace. Agaba immediately requested for the prince to be brought and laid outside as he went on to chant and consult the oracle. On seeing the prince, Agaba immediately shivered and let out an angry shout. He said, "Aru, this is an abomination. Where is the mother of this child? Get her here immediately." Uloma was brought before Agaba, who pointed to her and said, "Woman, you need to start confessing your sins now, else you will be struck by the gods of thunder." Uloma tearfully and fearfully started speaking. She said, "It is not my fault. Mama caused it all." Then she went on to narrate that before she got married to the king, she was already pregnant with another man's child, but her mother, Adaku, convinced her to marry the king and lied that the pregnancy belongs to the king, thereby resulting in the prince, who is a bastard child. At this point, more people had gathered around them and they all shouted, "Aru," in surprise. The king was shocked and could not utter a word. Agaba then called on Adaku to confess her part in the matter, else she will be struck dead too. Adaku also knelt down and tearfully revealed how she turned Kelechi's father's heart against Kelechi, how she changed the baby boy in Queen Kelechi's womb into a girl, how she manipulated the king into marrying her daughter, and how she convinced her daughter to bring a bastard child into the palace. The king buried his head in shame as he immediately realized how unfair he had been to his wife Kelechi and his daughter. The spell Adaku casted fell off Kelechi's father's face, and he ran to his daughter, hugged her, and pleaded for her forgiveness. The king banished Adaku, Uloma, and her son into the evil forest. He also asked Queen Kelechi and her daughter for forgiveness. A few days later, the king threw a big celebration and invited all the kings and dignitaries from neighboring kingdoms. During the celebration, the king called Princess Adugo and brought her in front of everyone, saying, "My people, we are here to celebrate the great victory that this kingdom has experienced. And today, I declare Princess Adugo as the heir apparent to the throne." The crowd cheered in surprise, as that was the first time a female child would be crowned the heir apparent to the throne. The king and Queen Kelechi ruled in love and fairness, and the people loved them. Many years later, the king passed away in his old age, and Princess Adugo became the queen of the kingdom, making her the first ever queen of the kingdom in history. She was a very strong and brave queen who fought many wars and never lost a battle.